New Delhi, you're watching DD India News, India's voice to the world. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next hour. International Atomic Energy Agency Chief Rafael Grossi visits the Kursk nuclear power plant in Russia to assess the situation. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks with US President Joe Biden, reiterates dialogue and diplomacy for resolving the Ukraine conflict. Facebook's owner says the US government put pressure on it to censor COVID-19 content, admits it was wrong to suppress news on Biden's son. Donald Trump casts doubt on his participation in a TV debate with Kamala Harris over microphone rules. Trump also questions the neutrality of broadcaster ABC News. And incessant rain wreaks havoc in the western Indian state of Gujarat. Schools closed, hundreds of people moved to safer areas. The chief of the United Nations atomic watchdog, Rafael Grossi, has reached Russia's Kursk nuclear power plant on Tuesday amid allegations from Moscow of repeated Ukrainian attacks on the facility. Situated about 40 kilometers from the volatile front lines, where Ukrainian forces have made incursions into Russian territory, the plant's safety is a pressing concern. Grossi's visit aims to assess the risks and ensure the plant's security as the ongoing conflict has consistently threatened nuclear facilities, putting them in danger. At least 4 people were killed after Russia launched a barrage of missile and drone attacks across some regions of Ukraine, a day after Moscow's biggest air attack on its neighbor. Now, Kyiv's air defenses were activated multiple times, successfully intercepting around 15 drones and several missiles. Intense clashes are underway in Russia's Belgorod region as Ukrainian forces launched a bid to breach the border. The situation remains fluid, with both sides engaged in heavy combat. Now, this follows Monday's attack, where over 200 Russian missiles and drones were launched at Ukraine, killing as many as 7 people and damaging Ukraine's energy infrastructure. The attack received a widespread international condemnation. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky decides to further strengthen the direction of the eastern strategic hub of Pokrovsk that has seen an intensified Russian military push recently. He said on Monday that he was briefed by his army chief on the situation in the area.
Today, I began the day with a separate, lengthy conversation with the Commander-in-Chief Zursky. We discussed in detail the repulsion of the missile strike, our response to Russia, which we are preparing, the use of F-16s and the operations in the Kursk region. We continue our actions in designated areas exactly as Ukraine needs. Over the day, we have gained more control and there has been another replenishment of the exchange fund.
And Dasha Chernysheва joins us from Moscow for more. Dasha, what more can you tell us about the visit by UN nuclear watchdog chief?
Well, that was the visit that has been much anticipated by the Russian side. So the Russian president has said before that Ukraine has attempted to attack the nuclear power plant in Russia's city of Kurchatov, that is in the Kursk region, and therefore he said that such a visit was absolutely necessary. Now, we know that this visit has begun, and Rafael Grossi, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, is personally leading the team of specialists to the city of Kurchatov at the Kursk nuclear power power plant. We understand that from the Russian side, there is the head of the city of Kurchatov, Igor Karpunkov, and the director of the Kursk nuclear power plant, Alexander Udavkin, speaking about what they are going to discuss. As per the statements from the Russian officials, they are intending to discuss the problem of the Ukrainian shelling and to provide and work out the steps for the further protection of the nuclear facility. Rafael Grossi, prior to this visit, has said that in no circumstances should the safety of any nuclear facility be put in jeopardy. So certainly a very important visit, and we will be waiting for the outcomes of this trip. As before, we have heard the Russian authorities insisting that the Ukrainian side has been attacking the nuclear power plant.
Indeed, while we wait for the outcomes of Grossi's ongoing visit to Russia, Dasha, what's the latest you are hearing from the front lines?
Well, certainly we are hearing the Russian military say that they are continuing to strike the Ukrainian positions within the Russian Federation in the Kursk region and outside in Belgrade, in the neighboring regions of Ukraine. But the number of drones that is being intercepted is also causing the casualties among the civilian population, both in Belgrade region and in the Kursk region. Interestingly, this morning we heard about an attempt allegedly by the Ukrainian troops to storm the border with Russia in the Belgorod region. Responding to those comments in the media, the governor of the region has quoted the Russian Ministry of Defense, saying that the situation in the region is difficult but controllable. And the Russian Ministry of Defense, he said, are controlling the situation on the border with Ukraine, conducting what he described as the planned works there. So he urged the residents not to worry and to allow the military to do their job.
Dasha, thank you. Dasha Chernyshova reporting there from Moscow. Well, moving on, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to US President Joe Biden and discussed regional and global issues, including the situation in Ukraine. Prime Minister Modi received a telephone call from the US President on Monday. The Prime Minister conveyed his appreciation for President Biden's deep commitment towards the India-US Comprehensive Global Strategic Partnership, which is based on shared values of democracy, rule of law, and strong people-to-people ties. The leaders reviewed the significant progress in bilateral relations and highlighted that the US-India partnership is aimed at benefiting the people of both countries as well as the entire humanity. The two leaders had a detailed exchange of views on a number of regional and global issues. While discussing the situation in Ukraine, Prime Minister Modi briefed President Biden on his recent visit to Ukraine. He reiterated India's consistent position in favor of dialogue and diplomacy and expressed full support for an early return of peace and stability. The two leaders also expressed their shared concern over the situation in Bangladesh. They emphasized a restoration of law and order and ensuring safety and security of the minorities, particularly the Hindus in that country. The two leaders agreed to remain in touch. And joining me for more is my colleague Akshay Dongre. Akshay, what did the two leaders have to say about Ukraine?
Well, the kind of diplomatic maneuvering, Ramesh, that Indian leadership has done this past year as far as the issue of Ukraine, a theatre of war, is concerned, it has been outstanding. In fact, this is a unique example, a textbook example of how a unique kind of diplomacy has been exhibited by the Indian leadership. The Prime Minister earlier met the Russian President. Now he embraced him, and then only a few days later he went and met the Ukrainian president as well, while doing the same thing, talking about how the entire world is looking for peace, not just in Ukraine but other theatres of war across the world as well, be it the conflict that is erupting or that has been going on in the West Asia or other parts of the world. So, as far as India's unique positioning as to deal with countries like Russia, and a possibility of India being a peacemaker that was explored to a large extent. In fact, as far as this conversation is concerned, the US President congratulated Prime Minister for his successful visit to Poland and Ukraine. He talked about the ongoing situation, from the perspective of the Prime Minister and what he thinks as far as a solution is concerned. So all of these things were talked about by the two leaders as far as the Ukraine war is concerned. And though we are seeing, global disruptions, be it to the supply chains, be it to the supply chain of food, grains to other countries as well, what can be the alternatives to find a way out? That was discussed by the two leaders in this telephonic conversation.
Akshay, the two leaders also discussed about the Quad. Any word yet on whether a Quad summit will indeed take place this year?
Well, according to the sources and from all the information that we have been getting so far, a Quad summit is most likely to take place here in India. In fact, India is going to host the Quad Leader Summit, where there is still speculation going on over whether or not US President Joe Biden is going to attend the Quad summit or not, but it is in all likelihood going to take place in India, and India is going to host the summit. It is going to be a huge summit, given the fact that the kind of global disruptions that we are seeing. Quad can be a force that can bring about a solution to the issues that the world is facing, with Japan, Australia, India and US being in the grouping. All the leaders are expected to discuss all of these concerns that the world is facing, be it the war in the Middle East, or the ongoing war in Ukraine, the other kind of supply chain disruption that Africa is facing, or the growing hegemonic tendencies of China in the Indian Ocean region and the Indo-Pacific region as well. So all that will be discussed as far as the Quad leadership is concerned, and in all likelihood, as I said, the meeting is going to take place in India.
All right, we'll leave it there. Akshay, thank you. Akshay Dongre reporting there from New Delhi. And now to West Asia. Israel's preemptive airstrikes on various Hezbollah targets in Lebanon on Monday successfully prevented an anticipated missile strike by the Lebanon-based group. Israel's military released a footage of the strikes, which showed an exchange of fire between Israel and the Hezbollah. Meanwhile, efforts to negotiate a ceasefire and a hostage release agreement between Israel and the Hamas remain stalled despite ongoing talks in Cairo aimed at achieving a truce in Gaza. Iran has leveled another threat as tensions mount in the West Asia, with its foreign ministry spokesperson saying Tehran's response to Israel will be definite, calculated and accurate in the wake of the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh earlier this month.
Structure. Well, it comes as Iran continues to level threats at Israel over the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh. He was the head of Hamas's Politburo, with that killing blamed on Israel. Now, Iran's foreign ministry has come out to say that the response will be definite and calculated, adding that Iran doesn't seek to increase tensions. However, it is not.
And joining me from Tel Aviv is my colleague Sarah Coates. Sarah, how's the situation now at the Israel-Lebanon border?
Well, certainly these cross-border strikes are continuing. Red alert sirens have been ringing out in these largely evacuated northern communities over the last couple of hours, while according to the Lebanese Health Ministry, some 4 people have been injured in southern Lebanon in fresh Israeli strikes. Now, we've also been hearing from CQ Brown. He's that top US general, of course, that's been visiting Israel over these last couple of days, holding very high-level meetings with senior Israeli officials here. He's spoken out about this looming threat of Iran, telling reporters that he believes the risk of a regional war has declined somewhat in the wake of this Sunday escalation between Israel and Hezbollah that saw Israel conduct these pre-dawn, preemptive raids on southern Lebanon, and then Hezbollah fire some 320 rockets and drones at Israel. Now, he went on to say that Iran wants to do something that sends a message, but they also don't want to do something that creates a broader conflict. So certainly, once again, there is a lot of tension here in the region. People are really waiting to see what Iran actually does. But certainly when you're talking about the current situation on that northern border, hostilities are continuing.
What more can you tell us about the Gaza ceasefire talks, Sarah?
Really, the only party that seems somewhat optimistic right now is the United States. We've been hearing from the National Security spokesperson, John Kirby. He says that these lower group of mediators will remain in Cairo this week. They're trying to iron out some of these bumps, some of these gaps between Israel and Hamas, a number of them being how many Palestinian prisoners would be released in exchange for Israeli hostages, who they would be, and actually when they would be released. But we do need to remember here that this one major sticking point remains. And for months and months, these working parties on the ground, wherever they may be, in Cairo or in Doha, they've been unable to bridge this gap, and that is the Israeli forces remaining on the Philadelphia corridor. Once again, that is that very narrow strip of land that separates Gaza and Egypt, and one that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that he will not pull troops out of, believing that this could then see a resurgence in weapons smuggling from Egypt into Gaza. But in terms of what we're seeing here on the ground in Israel, there's been a demonstration earlier this morning. Dozens of family members and loved ones of the Israeli hostages that do remain in the Strip. They've been blocking a fairly main highway just south of Tel Aviv, holding up banners, letting off smoke flares, demanding that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu agree to a deal with Hamas to get these remaining people home, really believing that this could be the last chance. Ramesh.
Sarah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Sarah Coates reporting there from Tel Aviv. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Japan says China violating its airspace is utterly unacceptable. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is in China for talks with the Chinese leadership. And in Bangladesh, a Dhaka court jails 388 Ansar personnel for ransacking the secretariat and attacking students.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. To the Indo-Pacific now, where Japan has termed the violation of its airspace by a Chinese military aircraft as quote-unquote utterly unacceptable. The reaction comes a day after Japan scrambled jets and summoned a Chinese embassy official in Tokyo in protest. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Hayashi Yoshimasa said the airspace breach was not only a serious violation of Japan's sovereignty, but also threatened the country's security. The government continues to monitor increasing Chinese military activity near Japan and will be fully prepared for any airspace violation.
昨日11時29分
This is the first time we have confirmed and publicly announced a breach of our airspace by a Chinese military aircraft since we began taking measures against acts violating our airspace. Such airspace breach by Chinese military aircraft is not only a serious violation of Japan's sovereignty, but it also threatens our security, which is utterly unacceptable.
Meanwhile, China has said that it was verifying Japan's claims of incursion by a Chinese military aircraft into its airspace. And Chris Gilbert joins us from Tokyo for more. Chris, what more can you tell us about China violating Japan's airspace?
Well, the government of Japan says it was a Y-9 Chinese surveillance plane, and the Defense Ministry is taking a cautious approach, unlike the politicians, not necessarily playing down, but not wanting Japan to overreact. They say that the surveillance plane grazed Japanese territory. Now that's indicative of both the how far it went into Japanese airspace, which is not very far, but also how long it spent, which was about 2 minutes before it promptly left Japanese airspace again. Now the Defense Ministry is saying it is waiting to find out exactly what happened, that it may have been a mistake, that the plane may have gone off course. However, there is also the fact that before it entered Japanese airspace, it circled immediately outside it for a while, and then after leaving, it circled again, spending some time just on the periphery of where Japanese territory begins and ends. So, as you mentioned, Chief Cabinet Secretary Hayashi has said it is unacceptable. Japan has lodged an extremely serious, in their words, protest to the representative here in Tokyo, and they want assurances from Beijing that this kind of thing is not going to happen again.
Chris, help us understand something here. There have been reports of China violating Taiwan's airspace, but are such airspace violations common insofar as Japan is concerned? Was it the first known instance of such a direct violation?
Well, it is the first time ever that a Chinese military plane has entered Japanese airspace, but it is not necessarily the first time that a Chinese plane has done so. There are the Senkaku Islands, which are disputed territories near Taiwan, as I say, disputed between Japan and China. And in 2012, a Chinese marine plane entered Japanese airspace there. And in 2017, a drone which took off from China entered Japanese airspace there. But again, that is disputed, as are the islands to the north of Japan, and in both of the with Russia, and in both of these regions, Japan is not unfamiliar with foreign vessels, Navy vessels, entering these disputed waters. Chinese vessels in the Senkaku Islands, Russian vessels in the northern Kuril Islands. But in this case, it's somewhat unique in that this is not disputed territory. It's fairly clear-cut. This was Japanese airspace that a Chinese surveillance plane entered willingly, wittingly or not. There are details still to come from China and from Japan's own analysis about what exactly happened. But as I say, Japan is seeking assurances from China that this was just a one-off and that it's not going to happen again.
All right, Chris, thank you. Much appreciated. Chris Gilbert reporting there from Tokyo. And staying in the region, the Philippines has... Chris, thank you. Much appreciated. Chris Gilbert reporting there from Tokyo. And staying in the region, the Philippines has strongly condemned China's actions in the South China Sea, describing them as quote-unquote aggressive, unprofessional and illegal, following a series of clashes and incidents in air and at sea over the past week. According to the Philippine National Maritime Council, Chinese aircraft engaged in reckless maneuvers near a civilian plane patrolling the Scarborough Shoal and Subi Reef. Chinese vessels reportedly harassed a Philippine government ship on a resupply mission to support local fishermen at Sabina Shoal, using tactics such as blocking, ramming and deploying water cannons on Sunday. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has reached Beijing on Tuesday for talks with China's top diplomat Wang Yi. The pair are expected to discuss the ongoing tensions in the South China Sea. This is the first trip to China by a U.S. National Security Advisor since 2016. And joining us from Hong Kong is Laura Westbrook. Laura, why is Sullivan visiting China and why now?
Well, this is a meeting, the latest high-level meeting to try and diffuse some of the tensions between the United States and China. Wang Yi and Jake Sullivan have met face-to-face 5 times, but this is the first trip by a U.S. National Security Advisor. It's the first trip by Jake Sullivan, but also the first trip by a National Security Advisor since the Obama administration, when Susan Rice visited Beijing in 2016. Now, the U.S. says that this trip is all about maintaining channels of communication as they try to maintain this important and strategic relationship responsibly. On the agenda, Jake Sullivan has now arrived in Beijing, and on the agenda are areas of cooperation from the issue of fentanyl, but they are also expected to discuss issues where there are disputes, such as the issue, as you mentioned, of the South China Sea, as well as the future of Taiwan. For China, this is very much a red line. It claims Taiwan as its own, but the US is expected to push China on its both economic and military pressure that it's been exerting on Taiwan as well.
Now that is insofar as the US and China are concerned, Laura, but what about the Philippines? What can you tell us about the recent tensions between the Philippines and China? Now, Manila says that its defense treaty with the US must be interpreted as more broadly to tackle what it calls a dynamic and cunning adversary.
Yes, we have heard from the Philippines defense chief, who has made some quite strong comments. He said that Beijing is the biggest disruptor of peace in Southeast Asia, and that China has acted illegally when it comes to the South China Sea. Now, we have seen increasingly combative encounters between China and the Philippines in this very strategic waterway in the South China Sea. Just a few days ago, in the latest confrontation, China said that it took control measures against 2 of the Philippines' vessels in one of the disputed areas, and that follows a series of encounters. One in June 15th was one of the most violent, in which a Filipino sailor lost a thumb. Now, what is concerning is that these increasingly combative encounters could escalate into something further, and that's why on this trip, Jake Sullivan is expected to raise the issue of the South China Sea, which he says is incredibly important. But for Beijing, it said, in a foreign ministry spokesman has said, that it wants to see the United States stay out of its backyard, and that it says that this is an issue that the region and countries in the region should discuss amongst themselves.
All right, we'll leave it there for now, Laura. Thank you. Laura Westbrook reporting there from Hong Kong. In some news from South Asia now, in Pakistan, the death toll in multiple cases of terror attacks reported in the Balochistan province has crossed 70. As per the latest reports, at least 73 people were killed when terrorists attacked police stations, railway lines and highways. Pakistan's military said 14 soldiers and police and 21 terrorists were killed in retaliatory operations. Rail traffic with Quetta was suspended on Monday following blasts on a rail bridge in the town of Bolan, linking the provincial capital to the rest of Pakistan, as well as on a rail link to neighboring Iran. And in Bangladesh, a court on Monday sent 388 Ansar personnel to jail in 4 cases for laying siege and ransacking the secretariat and launching an attack on students. According to police, a total of 437 named and 11,100 unnamed people were made accused in the 4 cases. Earlier on Sunday night, more than 40 people were killed when the clashes broke out between students and protesting Ansar personnel. Moreover, at least 6 army personnel were injured and one of them in critical condition. This according to Inter-Services Public Relations Office's press release issued on Monday. At around 10 p.m. local time on Sunday, Bangladesh army personnel had went to the spot and brought the situation under control. And now take a look at what else is making news around the world. Venezuela's opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez has been hit with a fresh summons for failing to appear before prosecutors as part of a probe into his claim of winning last month's presidential election. The leader has been in hiding since the election amid threats of arrest by President Nicolas Maduro. Hundreds of people took to the streets of Mexico's capital to protest against a controversial judicial reform pushed by the government. The proposed reform to elect judges by popular vote has sparked opposition from judicial workers who fear that it would politicize the judiciary and undermine merit-based appointments. SpaceX has postponed the liftoff of its polarized Dawn mission, which will include the first spacewalk by a civilian crew. A helium leak forced the delay of the capsule launch carrying 4 civilian astronauts that was scheduled for launch on the 27th of August. And still to come on DD India News Hour. An expert take on the US presidential election campaign and what a Trump or Harris presidency would mean for India and the world. And Meta founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg makes startling claims about the Biden government. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. A quick recap of the headline. But before that, let's get you some news from the US now. Meta founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg has made a stinging revelation about US President Joe Biden that might heavily impact the ongoing presidential campaign in the US. Zuckerberg made these revelations in a letter written to a committee of US lawmakers. In his letter, he said that in 2021, Biden government officials pressured him to censor some COVID-19 content and even jokes and satires related to it. In another revelation, Zuckerberg accused the officials of a premier US investigating agency of warning him to suppress contents related to corruption charges related to the then Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden's family. Zuckerberg said that the FBI had warned him that the information was a part of Russian disinformation campaign, which turned out to be otherwise. Lastly, in his letter, Mark Zuckerberg said that this year he will not make any contribution for creating electoral infrastructure for facilitating the US election. It's less than 70 days until the US election when people will decide on their next president and vote for lawmakers. There have already been dramatic twists and turns as incumbent leader Joe Biden dropped out after the first debate and Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt. He's now competing against Vice President Kamala Harris in what is tipped to be a close race to the White House, as Caroline Malone reports from Washington, D.C.
thank you for your historic leadership, for your lifetime of service to our nation, and for all you will continue to do. We are forever grateful to you.
Kamala Harris thanked current President Biden, who, in stepping down as Democratic candidate, has paved the way for her to compete. Polls show there's a chance she can win, even though she's only been running for just over a month.
I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me.
Harris is trying to draw a contrast between herself and Trump by supporting reproductive rights, pushing to fix a housing crisis and supporting the middle class. Above and beyond, she brings a new, younger energy to the election, one that Biden would most likely have lost to Trump.
Together we will launch a new era of safety, prosperity and freedom for citizens of every race, religion, color and creed.
Trump and the Republican Party are promising to crack down on crime and illegal immigration to boost the economy and control inflation, which they blame on Democrats and the Biden-Harris administration.
I don't think foreign policy is going to be like the key issue for a lot of voters. That said, I think on the Republican side, they definitely tie in opposition to Ukraine as part of a broader package of this kind of populisty, America first type of message.
Whether people vote on an issue or along party lines, they're choosing from candidates who are familiar to them, both with a track record. Harris as vice president and a former district attorney. Trump as a former president with a criminal record, which is likely to be brought up when they debate on September 10th.
Both of them like to get under the skin of the other one. Harris, of course, is a prosecutor, and when she was prosecutor, the other prosecutors would watch her. She was that good. And of course, Donald Trump loves to get under other people's skin. He likes to interrupt them, and he just really likes to call them out on a number of different things.
Shortly after the debate, many states will start receiving their mail ballots for people to start early voting, including in Georgia and North Carolina. They are among 7 key swing states that will be critical in deciding who wins the presidential election. Caroline Malone in Washington for DD India.
And Mr. Sanjay Bhattacharya joins us. Mr. Bhattacharya is a former Indian ambassador to Egypt, Turkey and Switzerland. Ambassador Bhattacharya, welcome to DD India News Hub. Now, how do you view the campaigns of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump? Anything out of the ordinary that stands out to you?
Well, there are a few unusual things that have happened in the last few weeks. Firstly, of course, Kamala Harris is a relative latecomer into the campaign, but she has picked up momentum very considerably and very fast, and she's narrowed the gap with Trump, who was leading the hustings with Biden initially. The fact that she is the first woman of African and Indian descent, is Jamaican and Indian descent, is also something that is very interesting for the White House and for the people of the United States to contend with. But I think that apart, there are significant things that come out of the initial remarks from both sides. I think in her initial acceptance speech, Kamala Harris, which was a relatively short one, made 4 things very clear. First, she outlined the very sharp difference between herself and former President Donald Trump. And she was trying to woo certain people, in particular the liberals and the ones who were the fence sitters. The second thing that she made was that she made it very clear that she would be fairly robust on the America First agenda. And in that particular context, she said in specific that it would be America, not China, that would win the 21st century. The third thing, again, which I think Kamala Harris said, which actually appeals to the social sentiments of the people, and her comments on abortion and some of the other issues about middle class was something that was also extremely important for the American people who are looking for a way forward. And the fourth one was the one that pertains particularly to foreign policy. She didn't make too many comments, but she said that she would continue with the support for Ukraine and for Israel, and that she would not hug dictators. Now, this is, of course, an initial kind of a remark, and I think over the days we shall see how this contest pans out. But I must say that Kamala Harris has made a very impressive entry.
Here, I'd like to ask you a related question, Ambassador. What do you make of Facebook owner Mark Zuckerberg's explosive allegations? He admits that the Biden government pressured Facebook to censor COVID-19 content. He also says that it was wrong to suppress a news report on Biden's son. Do you think this damning allegation will harm Kamala Harris's campaign going forward?
To be honest, the rules of governance regarding social media are still somewhat fuzzy. The role that governments should have and corporates should have is still being defined. And of course, we've seen over the last decade or so that there has been increasing pressure on the corporate sector, the ones who actually produce these social media platforms, to be far more responsible. And I think that is happening essentially on 3 different platforms. The first is a lot of social media content tends to be emotive rather than factual. And therefore, how do you deal with these emotive issues when you have to deal with matters of policy and matters of state? The second is that fact-checking has become an extremely difficult issue. And there are often contestations even amongst the private parties, but particularly when it comes to the governments and when they want to have censorship of certain ideas that are coming forward. And the third, which is actually perhaps the most serious, is that since social media has huge impact on people at large and has the ability to influence voters, let us say, there is always a consciousness that a certain narrative needs to be promoted. Now, sometimes this narrative may be in line with what national security objectives are, but they may be counter to what transparency objectives are, what data privacy issues are, and therefore these dilemmas are not yet worked out, and therefore what Mark had said about the kind of pressure on him to impose censorship of sort is fairly serious. But the world is still undefined in terms of the rule of the law on this.
Indeed, and shifting the focus back to diplomacy, Ambassador, how would you describe India-US relations? Also, what will a Trump or Harris presidency mean for India and the world at large?
I think the congruence of our broader objectives and our perceived roles and collaboration in the future architecture of the globe are now emerging and are becoming fairly clear on a bipartisan basis. And therefore, in a certain sense, we would say that whether it is a Republican government or it's a Democratic government, I think the broad issues of our relationship will continue to go ahead, particularly when we look at the future-oriented partnership, which is about our development exercise, the security in the neighborhood, and in the broader Indo-Pacific. I think those kinds of collaboration would continue as they have. We, of course, have had the experience of working with Donald Trump in the past, and it had been a very productive period for India-US relationship. I have no doubt that if Mr. Trump wins, that kind of collaboration would expand further. At the same time, I think we have very good understanding with the Democrats, but I must add that we should not put too much pressure on Ms. Harris if she wins the elections about her Indian origins and roots, because I think...
Why do you say that, Ambassador?
India first. She would have to stand for US first. Sorry?
Why do you say that we should not focus too much on her Indian identity or origin?
Right. Because we have to recognize that while her mother, who she's very deeply attached to, was Indian, and she carries several traits of being an Indian, and she's very proud of the fact as well, as she is of her father and her Jamaican heritage. When you put pressure on a person of the so-called diaspora and expect things to happen in a certain way, we have to understand that she would represent America first. And I think that's one of the things that she mentioned in a broader context, not in in the context of India, but in a broader context, how she would put America first. And I think that is the responsibility and that is the allegiance that she has undertaken as an American. And I think we have to respect that. But I think quite apart from that, even once we do that, there is so much of congruence between India and the United States today. I'm sure whoever comes, we would have a wonderful relationship going ahead.
All right, on that note, may I thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts and insights with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Right, in some more news from India, the country's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar welcomed Brazil's Foreign Minister Mauro Vieira for the 9th India-Brazil Joint Commission meeting in New Delhi on Tuesday. As the opening remarks of the meeting, Minister Jaishankar says that India looks forward to discussing key G20 outcomes from India's G20 presidency last year. Minister Vieira's visit is an opportunity to explore new avenues of cooperation in bilateral, regional and multilateral arena across diverse sectors. The Ministry of External Affairs said the meeting will provide further impetus to the strategic partnership between India and Brazil. Brazil's foreign minister is on a 4-day official visit to India.
Also begin by congratulating Brazil for conducting the G20 meeting successfully and also on the first ministerial consensus document realized during the G20 Development Working Group ministerial meeting. I'd like to reiterate India's full support to the Brazilian G20 presidency and also recall that we got your fullest support during our own presidency. We also have a very important energy cooperation between our two countries. And we, of course, have particularly valued the biofuels cooperation that India and Brazil have established.
In other news, 7 people have lost their lives in the past 24 hours in the western Indian state of Gujarat as incessant rainfall continues to lash all the districts of the state. Heavy rains are expected to continue in the state till the 29th of August, with the IMD predicting extremely heavy rainfall across the state. Gujarat has completed about 100% of average monsoon rainfall. Indian Coast Guard is carrying out an operation to rescue 10 fishermen on a boat which is stranded south of Dwarka. The fishermen have been advised not to venture off the coast of Gujarat. The Indian government has allocated 6 army units in the state for relief, rescue and disaster management in the state. The state is on a weather red alert till the 30th of August. Trains of the Western Railways are running behind schedule. Buses in many parts of Saurashtra have ceased operations because many areas remain marooned. And joining me for more on this developing story is my colleague Meghna Dev. Meghna, before we come to the weather in the state, we're getting report that the Indian Coast Guard is carrying out an operation to rescue fishermen on board a boat which is stranded south of Dwarka, about 14 kilometers from where you are. The Coast Guard is trying to extract the crew. About 10 people on board are reported to be present. What more can you tell us?
So currently, as we speak, as you said, there's an operation going on. Now, what the Indian Coast Guard officials are telling us that there are 10 fishermen on board. They're trying to extract the crew from the place, but just because this is the weather, because of the weather, the sea is very rough. It is a task for the Indian Coast Guard to extract the crew from the boat, but they're using helicopters. That's what we're being told. And, in some time from now, we'll get to know if they have been rescued from there or still the operation is going on. Because Indian Coast Guard, since, a couple of days, has been giving out advisories to fishermen on the coastline, because we know the Gujarat has a vast coastline, about 1,600 kilometers. So that makes it very important for the Coast Guard to assure that the fishermen don't venture into the sea during this season, specifically when the sea is very rough. So this is something that currently is going on, from the aspect of the Indian Coast Guard. But besides that, a number of relief and rescue operation is going on in the number of parts, specifically in the Saurashtra region. As we speak in the central Gujarat region, I'm in Ahmedabad, which is a part of central Gujarat. We also see that in Vadodara, the Vishwamitri River has overflown and which has caused a lot of devastation, specifically in the residential areas. There's a lot of waterlogging which has been reported, and SDRF team are on their toes and trying to relocate people from the low-lying areas. So there is definitely, because of the incessant rainfall, a lot of problem is being faced by people here in Gujarat. But on a better note, 100% of average rainfall Gujarat has received, which is a good sign, specifically when we talk about the dams which are full to their capacity.
All right, we'll leave it there. Meghna, thank you. Appreciate it. Meghna, they reporting there from Gujarat. The changing weather conditions are leading to rising of sea levels at an alarming rate, especially in the far more vulnerable Pacific Island nations. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres issued yet another climate SOS to the world. This time, he said those initials stand for Save Our Seas.
The world must look to the Pacific and listen to science. This is a crazy situation. Rising seas are a crisis entirely of humanity's making. A crisis that will soon swell to an almost unimaginable scale with no lifeboat to take us back to safety. But if we save the Pacific, we also save ourselves. The world must act and enter the SOS before it's too late.
Guterres was addressing the Pacific Islands Forum being held in Tonga. The United Nations and the World Meteorological Organization on Monday issued reports on worsening sea level rise, turbocharged by a warming Earth and melting ice sheets and glaciers. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Canada to impose a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicle imports. India's squad for Women's T20 World Cup announced. And we get you all the action from the US Open as Novak Djokovic and Aryna Sabalenka begin their campaigns with a straight sets win. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. To some business news now. India has been declared the world's fastest growing major economy by the International Monetary Fund's latest World Economic Outlook report as of July 2024. The country has outperformed the major economies such as China, the US and Russia. The IMF forecasts India's economic growth to reach an impressive 7% in 2024 and 6.5% in 2025. Currently, India ranks as the 5th largest economy globally in terms of gross domestic product, but is poised to ascend to the 3rd spot in the near future, solidifying its position as a dominant player in the global economic landscape. And following the lead of the US, Canada will impose a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicle imports. The country also plans to impose a 25% duty on Chinese steel and aluminium. The duties apply to all EVs shipped from China, which would include those made by Tesla. Canada's duties on Chinese EVs are due to come into effect on the 1st of October, while those on steel and aluminium will be implemented from the 15th of October. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Ottawa will continue to work with the US and other allies to ensure that customers around the world are not unfairly penalized by non-market practices of countries such as China. The European Union this month imposed tariffs of up to 36.3% on imports of Chinese-made EVs. And now to all the news from the world of sport. As India gears up for the Paris 2024 Paralympics, the anticipation is high with the country's largest ever contingent set to compete. Scheduled from August 28 to September 8, the Games will feature 84 Indian athletes, a significant increase from the 54 who took part in Tokyo 2020. Here are some of the key Indian medal hopefuls for Paris 2024.
Avni Lekhra, parachuting. Avni Lekhra made history at the Tokyo 2020 as the first Indian woman to win Paralympic gold. She excelled in the 10-meter air rifle SH1 event and also won bronze in the 50-meter rifle 3 positions SH1. Lekhra's continued dominance in shooting is highly anticipated as she returns to defend her titles in Paris. Sumit Antil, para-athletics. Sumit Antil, the gold medalist in the men's F64 javelin throw at the Tokyo Paralympics, is a two-time world champion and holds the world record in his category. Antil's exceptional form and previous successes make him a leading contender for gold in Paris Paralympic Games. Manish Narwal, parachuting. Manish Narwal clinched gold medal in the mixed 50-meter pistol SH1 event at the Tokyo Paralympics. His sharpshooting skills and previous accolades place him among the top competitors in Paris Games. Krishna Nagar, para-badminton. Krishna Nagar secured gold in men's singles SH6 at Tokyo 2020. His exceptional performance and previous successes make him a strong candidate for a medal in Paris Paralympic Games. Sheetal Devi, para-archery. At 17, Sheetal Devi is a rising star in para-archery. She won gold in the individual compound and mixed team compound events at the 2022 Asian Para Games, and her strong performances make her a strong contender for the Paris Paralympic Games also. Suyash Jadhav, para-swimming. Suyash Jadhav is prominent para-swimmer, won gold in the 50-meter butterfly at the Asian Para Games. He will compete in the multiple events, including the 50-meter freestyle and 100-meter backstroke, aiming to build on his past successes. Narayan Singh's report, DD India.
The BCCI on Tuesday announced India's 15-member squad to feature in the upcoming Women's T20 World Cup 2024 in the United Arab Emirates in October. Harmanpreet Kaur will lead the side with Smriti Mandhana named as her deputy. Richa Ghosh and Yastika Bhatia are the designated wicket-keepers in the side. India's batting core will be rounded up by opener Shefali Verma, Jemima Rodriguez and Dayalan Hemalata in the top order. All-rounder Deepti Sharma, left-arm spinner Radha Yadav and leg spinner Asha Shobhana will lead the spin department. India have only made one change from their recent Women's Asia Cup campaign in Sri Lanka, with Bhatia replacing Uma Chetri in the 15-member team. The T20 World Cup will begin from the 3rd of October, with India opening their campaign against New Zealand on the 4th before a marquee clash against Pakistan on the 6th. Defending champion Novak Djokovic enjoyed a comfortable win in the first round of the US Open on Monday. Djokovic, looking to become the first player to capture 25 Grand Slam titles, capped the evening session with a victory over Moldovan qualifier Radu Albot. The Serbian world number 2 had not competed since winning the Olympic gold medal in Paris and shook off the rust to cruise past Albot in his bid to become the first man to retain the New York title since Roger Federer in 2008. And in some more news coming your way, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday held a conversation with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. In a post on X, Prime Minister Modi said, discussed measures to further strengthen special and privileged strategic partnership, exchanged perspectives on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and my insights from the recent visit to Ukraine. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of DD India News Hour. You can get all the latest news and updates on the DD India mobile app. It's available on Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen to download it. And let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out our website ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran from all of us here in New Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.